it was starting to take over from everything. Like, I dropped football and stuff like that at school. It was just wrestling. I was watching WWF, I was watching WCW. It was just, and my best friend, who I can happily say is still my best friend today, Matt Myers, we was just enamoured with it. It became, everything to us. And so anytime there was wrestling in the local area, as I mentioned with IWP, we would always attend. And one of the first ones we attended was All Star at Hull City Hall, which Brian Dixons' legacy speaks for itself, how long he's been running. And I remember on that show just thinking, I really want to be here at one point. Like, I've got to wrestle in Hull City Hall, and I really want to work for All Star Wrestling, because like we got the program, and so we'd read through it, and they had like a little, like a blurb about the history of it. I was like, God, these got like years. This is the place. And I became a huge Robbie Dynamite fan that night. Robbie Dynamite and Dean Allmark was the two people that I remember leaving that show having a lasting impression of. Joe Legend as well. I remembered him, but Robbie Dynamite for me was just, I want to one day be like him, because he was just so good, in my opinion, and still to this day is. So, fast forward, I think that first show we went to see was in 2004. Fast forward 6 years later, and I was wrestling Robbie for Brian. And I remember the first match I had when I was limited in Spa. That was just surreal. It was like, wow, I remember it's just...
It is, I agree,
so much. But so, yeah, it was a mixture by then, because All Star made me aware that there was British wrestling out there. FWA came on the wrestling channel, which did a lot more for it. And so it was always... I mean, the internet wasn't as accessible as it is today. It was there, but we didn't really have that much access to it, so it was hard to get, to see wrestling from anywhere across the UK, unless they came to Hull, or unless it was on the wrestling channel. But that was, and they always used to show reruns of World of Sport, and that, again, most people my age from that time period of of WF, WCW, would find that wrestling boring. But I could always, I always manage, and I'm not saying manage, that's the wrong word, but I always appreciated it, and I always enjoyed watching it, and I always understood the art form of British wrestling as much as I did, watching Stone Cold charge the ring and beat up 30 men, whatever it might be. Yeah. I could appreciate the fact that, okay, that's what that is, and that's what this is, and I want to be, and like I mentioned, I want to be like Robbie Dynamite. Robbie Dynamite to me was that mixture of the two. He was like, okay, he's got this aura about him that like your current superstars in WWF have, but then he has this fundamental British talent. It was such a unique thing for me to see at that time, and so I always enjoyed watching World of Sport as much as I did watching Raw.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is the way, like you say, perfectly put there. British wrestling, I think if it had been, would it have done or would it not have done, I'm not sure, but I think the way it should have gone would have, like you say, keep with the Britishness, but modernise it with a little bit more of the American, not necessarily American, but take the American show-busy side of it, but keep our style of wrestling. I think wrestling in Britain would just be as popular as ever. I mean, and I think it probably is coming back that way at the minute, from what I can gather.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I always, especially when I started working for Brian, it was always a thing that I just thought, well, why haven't you tried to get TV again? Because you've kind of caught up with that, and like maybe not as much as some places, but I liked the fact that Brian still kind of honoured certain British traditions, and then he still had these, he had younger guys such as myself. I was only 19 when I started for Brian, coming in with this, this new style, but then we would be mentored by people who were still travelling with Brian, such as James Mason, Robbie Brookside, Robbie Dynamite, Dean was on there, Rampage Brown, who I will probably put over a ton in this podcast because he has taught me so much, and to this day I still think he's the best wrestler in Europe. And I had all these, you know what I mean, like when you was away and you were that young, so you've got these ideas and stuff you've seen, but then you'd be helped moulded by all these guys. Mikey Whiplash spent so much time going through, old school British wrestling with me because he was a big fan of that. Him and Ringo Ryan and Tony Spitfire, three of the most underrated in-ring modern day British style of wrestler that I've ever seen in my life. It was just, and that was again to me. I just thought, well, come on, like you've got this, Brian, and I think it's such a unique thing. But Brian's mentality was that he could never compete with WWE because of the production values that they've got. It always looked like a second product, and he never wanted it to be that. It was just, no, this is All Star Wrestling. I got that to an extent. I think that was just the ambitious side of me, always wanting to see it go further. Which know now with NGW and where they're going with TV and stuff like that, I'm starting to see that, and I'm really excited about that.
I again understand. I used to say to Brian, because like you said, I would have been like 17 when I was working for Brian. I'd say, Brian, why don't we like do some G's for the end? Why don't we do something for next time we come back and everything? Oh no, we don't need to do that. Oh fucking hell, they'll come back anyway. But we might get some more. They'll remember. They'll remember we did that fucking 4 years ago. They'll fucking get it. But I used to say the same thing to him, and so we've got to talk Brian Dixon, because obviously I can see that All Star is, as well, I can hear from a previous interview I listened to you, has made a dramatic impact. What was the difference from when you were wrestling? In fact, let's go a little bit further back, because obviously you did a lot with Alex Shane to start with while you were pretty young, didn't you? Mm-hmm. Now, I've known Alex forever. We're getting on 20 years. I've worked with him hundreds of times. Where did Alex Shane come into your wrestling career?
2008. It was January 2008, I think. And it was when the writing was kind of on the wall with Ron. I was kind of like I'm really getting fed up of being here. And Alex had a guest seminar there, and he says this as well, and I don't know if because Alex is a big believer in psychic and stuff like that, and that's his thing. Yeah. But at the same time, like it blows me away that he said in that room he just felt like he had this connection kinetically with me, and that anything he was saying, he could tell that I felt the same. Like I felt like, I know he's talking to this group, but I feel like he's talking just to me. And Alex has said that in interviews and to me since, and he said it's no surprise that you are where you are, and that was it. And I remember thinking, and he was talking to me in that room at that time about, even if you feel that you're restricted here, you have to be confident that you can fly the nest. And that's what I did from there. I started saying, I've been here long enough, and whatever the situation was with Ron, and I was sick of like putting up with him. So I was like, right, I want to get out there. This is what I want. I want to make this my life. And so I from Alex's talk with me, and I'd spoke to him a bit one-on-one via MySpace at the time, if anybody remembers that, fossil social media. And then it started. That relationship was there, and I think from there, because after that, Alex kind of stepped back from wrestling for a while. I think he went to India.
He did. Huh?
And in that time, I'd met El Ligero, and El Ligero took me under his wing. And still to this day, I always go to Liggs for advice or help with stuff, because I think he's got such a sharp brain for this. And
you speak Spanish? You speak Spanish?
Yeah, well, that's what my GCSE language was, which helps me a lot speaking to Simon Musk. But he was a huge part in me making that next step from like, okay, now I've and at the time, because like I said, I'd just been wrestling for Ron, and I'd had brief encounters with other experienced guys. Ricky Knight was one of them. And they'd give me what advice they could based on what they'd seen of me on that night. But I was looking for, I've got to go further. And luckily for me, I think the thing that's always carried me by is my charisma. My second love is acting. And that's what I did at college. I did acting. And I think Ligero could see that in me. Okay, there's definitely something with him. Took me under his wing and really did teach me a lot, and it really did, and it helped transform me from Nathan Irwin, which was what I was wrestling under, trying to find a character, to at the time the prima donna Nathan Cruz. which was all again based off the fact that I was studying. I was doing an acting degree at college, and at the time, teen celebrities were everywhere. I was 17, pushing 18, and it was like, well, this is perfect. You can be that obnoxious little bastard that everybody hates at the moment, and that they can project that anger onto you, and you can just soak it up. And that was where it became. And from there, Alex came back and had seen what I now, transformed into, and I'd put on a bit of size, because when I first started wrestling, Ron thought it was good to put me on a show when I was 9 stone, like this skinny little kid. I just had nothing. And
pleather pants? Did you have pleather pants and kick pads?
I had big black pleather pants, an Adidas vest, elbow pads that was constantly sliding off me because it was so big on my noodle arms. It was just so, it was so embarrassing. But I was just such a, and I am, I find it very hard to put size on. But I'd gone to the lengths to, at that point, I think I bulked myself up to about 10.5, 11 stone, and I'd done a summer season for Sykes, who again gave me another opportunity to wrestle. We was wrestling for Sykes twice a week at the Beachcomber in Cleethorpes, which you know very well.
My hometown, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And at the Suncastle in Skegness.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a combination, I think, of that Alex then came back to the country. So what I'd done was like, wow, and he wanted me a part of when he brought FWA back. And at that same time, I'd done the odd show for Brian. I'd done a Skegness camp against Rampage Brown, the first All Star match, and then from there, I did a show at Croydon, which was the first time Brian saw me, and I wrestled Tony Spitfire. And Spitty, again, like mentioned, such an underrated talent, made me look the best I could, and it made the match a very British wrestling match with that sports entertainment all-star atmosphere. Again, and it just, Brian, when I left and I collected my wages from him, he said, what's your number, what's your email? Gave him it, and from there I was on his half-term run. From there I got invited onto the camps, and then from there Alex, in that same time period, Alex had said, I'd like you to take the show stealer name. It's like, and I was mulling it over, and this is, I'm sure Alex won't take any offence to this. Alex hasn't got the best track reputation across British wrestling. He has mixed reviews depending on who he speaks to.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
At All Star, it was a negative one because it had some.
Yes, this is a question I'm going to bring to you. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, he'd had some bad experience in that. I want to clear on what it was. Also, I knew that Alex was helping me. Brian was helping me. I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. But I weighed it out. I thought, you know what, Brian probably won't want me to use the show steal name, but he ain't gonna not book me from that. And everywhere else in the country will probably help me, and they'll put a bit of steam behind me, which it did. So of course I accepted, and we had a match at NGW for the rights to the name, and it was just that year, 2010, that was my breakout year, because like I said, I started wrestling for Brian full time. He invited me to that summer. I remember the conversation. But you want me fucking using that show stealer name? Okay. So I mean, to this day, I still am the prima donna when I wrestle for Brian.
You'll be the fucking Pink Power Ranger. That's what you'll be.
Exactly. So and then I that summer, and I really have to mention this, it was brilliant. I'd wrestle my match against, 9 times out of 10 I was wrestling a guy called Shadow Phoenix, who was Japanese but trained in Mexico with Ultimo Dragon.
Okay.
So I learnt a lot from him of these two different styles that he had. And then the second I'd come back from a match, Rampage, Dynamite, Whiplash would be there. Critique. Thank you very much, gents. Grab my camera, because I'd record every match, and then would be in the Beast, which is the 7-seater car, and I'd sit in the back with Liggs if he was with us, or Dynamite.